clever ones among the Indians get jobs with the church as singers or clerks. Because of the incompetence or the absence of the priests, they soon find themselves burying the dead with all the proper prayers and responses. They take vespers, they look after the music and the singing, as well as intoning the prayers. On Sundays and holy days, they conduct the ceremonies as well as any Spaniard. In default of a priest, they baptize the babies, reciting the proper form of words. And this is allowed by the authorities to avoid any of the small creatures going to limbo for lack of baptism. However, they get nothing but interference from the priests themselves, and will usually refer to them dismissively as clever children. Any further thoughts on this? Well, let's try one more story. It's the one that you find next, page 74 volume. It's too long, I think, for us to read. Let me try and summarize it and see what you make of it. Especially perhaps in the light of our conversation just now about the Reformation. It comes from the 1640s. It was written by a parish priest. It's relating to the previous century. 1531, the event starts, in part of what is now Mexico City. The 1531 is still early days. The destruction of the Aztec Empire is very recent. Crowds of the native population are being instructed in what they should believe. And they're not resisting. They're turning up to these catechetical instructions. There's no organized resistance. This is a broken people. Mexico was actually called New Spain. That was the official name of the country. And of course the idea is that it'll have the law and custom of old Spain. That's what territorial Christianity is going to mean. And here are these people being turned into Spaniards by means of the catechism. The church authorities have forbidden all traditional customs, not only all cults, but all dancing. Some people tried to say that the dance was going to be in honor of the Virgin, but the church authorities would not allow that. Dancing was stopped. Juan Diego, John James, is the name of one of these catechumens. He's got now a Christian name, Spanish name, but he's not yet baptized. He's receiving instruction towards baptism. He was on his way to church one day when he passed the hill of Tepeyac, which is, again, if you know Mexico City, you'll know it. He heard singing and saw a lady with a child who called him over. She addressed him by name and told him that she was the mother of the true God, in whom we live and move and have our being. She told him too that she wanted to give everyone here her love, her pity, her help, her protection. I am your mother, she said, and the mother of all who live here. Tell the bishop I want him to build a church here on the hill. Juan Diego went to the bishop, who didn't believe him. He went back to the hill, and Mary sent him back to the bishop. The next day, being Sunday, Juan Diego waylaid the bishop coming out of church, and the bishop was still unconvinced and said he needed evidence. Juan Diego didn't go back to the hill because his uncle fell dangerously ill, and he went off to get a priest. The uncle appeared to be dying, so get a priest for the last rites for a dying man. On the way, Mary met him and assured him that his uncle was cured. And she gave him a sign to take to the bishop. When he returned, the impression of the Virgin was imprinted on his rough peasant blanket. The bishop, seeing the blanket, was eventually convinced and built a church where the blanket was kept. And a mass movement of indigenous people followed. You've had this very reluctant acquiescence in Christianity. Now you're getting the first real movement among local people towards Christianity. What do we make of this story as good Protestants? It's a vision of Mary, but Mary points to her Son and to God in whom we live and move and have our being. Juan Diego was a catechumen who had doubtless been taught to see Mary as a mediator. First prayer he learned was probably the Ave Maria. Perhaps he wouldn't have known where the vision was coming from by any other route than Mary. It's the only way in which he would have known that this was the voice of the Christian God that was coming. Mary speaks to Juan Diego in Nahuatl, the only language he knows. The bishop didn't know Nahuatl. We know that because an interpreter is called in to carry out the interview. The voice of God comes not to the Spanish-speaking, theologically trained bishop. It comes to an illiterate peasant who's not even been baptized. And it comes not in the language of the church, but in his own language. The Spanish treatment of indigenous languages varied, but again the theologians come in here and decide that the indigenous languages cannot really be used for church purposes. They are too full of idolatrous symbols. You cannot use an indigenous name for God. You must use the Spanish Dios or the Latin Deus. This vision is coming in now. The impression on the blanket, and of course the blanket has remained. The impression on the blanket is of a dark-skinned woman. The features are Indian. She's wearing Spanish dress, but Nahuatl ornaments, the earrings and so on. In other words, Juan Diego hasn't been getting this from some Spanish picture in a church. This isn't a picture that's come from Europe. This is a native woman.